Thank you for joining us at ChristianPhotoshops.com. Today we're going to be doing a Photoshop tutorial, and this one is going to be based on the Bible verse Romans 8:28, which says, "And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them that are called according to His purpose." So the whole point of this Photoshop is going to be to try to represent that Bible verse in a unique way, and I'm thinking about having an image of a person carrying that Bible verse. The Bible verse is a promise of God, a promise that God has a plan for our life and that He's working all things together for our benefit and for our good. And so we're going to try to represent that we can carry that promise wherever we go. So let's go and get started. I've already got the canvas, the blank canvas already open up. We're only going to need 4 images really for this picture, so I'll go and show you the images we're going to be using. First one is a landscape, just a normal grassy field. We've got the sky and the clouds in the background. The next thing we'll be using is the actual Bible verse, Romans 8:28, and this is just a 3D text created in a program called Zara. So I went ahead and created Romans 8:28 and then imported it into Photoshop, so we're going to be using that. We're going to need someone to carry the Bible verse, so we have a model that's positioned with her hands so she can be carrying the Bible verse, and we'll have to cut her out of the background. And the last picture we need is just a texture that we'll use to just kind of enhance some of the elements of the picture. So those 4 items again, just a background, a grassy field, the 3D text, the model, and then the texture. So let's go and get started. We have our canvas open. Like I said, the first thing I always like to start with is the background. The background in this situation is the landscape picture, the grassy field. So let's go ahead and drag that right into the canvas. And you can position this pretty much any way you want to. I personally do not like doing 50% sky and 50% ground, so I'm going to off-center it just a little bit. I'm going to do pretty much 60% sky and about 40% ground. It's just a little bit of that asymmetry that I think looks really good. So go ahead and hit the check mark. We've got the background in the picture, so let's go ahead and add the model in there. The model, it was taken in a room, and so we're going to have to cut her out of there, so we just take the model and not the background with it. So to cut out a person, there's many ways you can do it. Some people use the pen tool, some people use the lasso tool, but I personally like the quick selection tool, which is this tool right over here. All you gotta do is select it, and then all you have to do is start painting on the outside of the model, and Photoshop will pretty much determine what parts you want, what parts you do not want. So all you have to do is just take your mouse with the tool, paint around the edges of the model, and it's going to quickly select the outline of the model. Now there's going to be spots where it doesn't do it perfectly, and we can fix that in a second. But for the most part, I think this is one of the best tools that Photoshop has as far as selecting items off of a background. Alright, so we got a pretty good selection here of the model. There's a couple spots that didn't work out so well, so we're going to go click the minus button right here, get rid of that part. And then it deleted too much, so we're going to add a little bit right back in there. Alright, there's a couple strands of hair we did not get, and this is a little bit more complicated to get the hair, but we got a pretty rough outline of the model, and that's a good starting point. So once you have a rough outline of the model using the quick select tool, the thing I like to do next is go to Window, Masks, and then click your Add a Pixel Mask. So go ahead and click that. What this does is it removes the background completely. Everything that you did not select is now deleted, and you're just left with a model. But then we're going to refine the edge, or mask the edge. So you can see we have a pretty good outline, but Photoshop didn't do a great job. There's some spots in here that's kind of rough. And so on your refine mask tool right here, I'm going to bring this edge detection radius up to about 10 pixels. Yeah, we'll do it right at about about 13 pixels looks good. I'm going to click on Smart Radius, which is, it does a lot better selection. And so now you see those rough edges are not there anymore. And we can scroll down, and the feet look fine as well. The arms look fine. And now all those little strands of hair that we were missing, Photoshop got most of them with this refine mask, but if you want to add a few more, what you can do is paint the edges, and it'll grab even more of those details. So all you have to do is just paint around the hair, and it'll get all those little wispy hairs that kind of went everywhere. All right, that looks pretty good. Once you're satisfied, just hit OK. And what this has done is created a mask that you can select and take her into the other picture. But before we do that, there's a couple spots that Photoshop didn't do a really good job. It deselected some of it, and I'll show you that real quick. I'm going to do, for example, I'm going to do like a reddish background and zoom in, and you can see some of the parts that were deleted. So what we're going to do is just go and paint that back really quick using a white brush on the mask. So just paint back a few of those spots that were deleted. You could spend all day looking at these pixels and fixing it. We're not going to spend all this time doing quite an extensive job with that for this tutorial, but try to make the cutout as believable as possible. Feet look good. Everything else looks good. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the mask. And then the last thing I like to do to make the selection just a little bit better is go to Layer, Matting, Defringe, and 1 pixel, and click OK. All right, so we have our model. She's completely cut out of the background. And what we're going to do is just drag her into our canvas. Okay, she's into our canvas now, and we're going to figure out a place to put her. I think she's a little too big for this situation, so we're going to make her a little bit smaller. I'm going to put her about right, we'll say about right there or so. All right, so we got our model in the background, and it obviously looks like she was just thrown in there. It does not make sense. This would be a Photoshop disaster if you were to save it like this, because she cannot stand on the grass like that. That is impossible. So we're going to have to blend her into this background in a way that makes it look believable. So the way I like to do that, well, there's several ways to do that, but we're going to create a mask, and you're going to have to delete part of her feet and legs that you would not see. This would be hiding behind the grass. And so if you just wanted to do a really quick brush and just erase part of her feet, you could do that. Just like that. But that looks horrible. I mean, no one is going to believe that she's actually in that grass, because this brush does not mimic the grass at all. So the way I like to fix this is, first thing I like to do is when I create the brush to erase it, the first thing I do is make it a softer brush, so it's not quite as hard. Paint a little bit up like that. And then that still does not look right. It kind of looks like she's more in water than she is in grass. So we're going to have to fix that so she actually looks like she's more in the scene. So the best way to do that is to have a brush that looks like grass and then erase part of her. Now, there are millions and millions of brushes on the internet, and you can find them all over the place. And I have a brush that looks pretty much like a piece of grass. All it is just, it looks like that. So you could paint all of these little stalks of grass, and then we could use that to delete part of her legs. But the problem with this is, if you just painted like this, the grass doesn't really look like that. Grass is all different shapes, and it goes in all different directions, and so painting like that's not going to be very useful. So what we need to do is go to your brush panel, click on Shape Dynamics, go to your Size Jitter, and we're going to change it to about 35% or so. Your angle jitter, change that to about 10-12%, something like that. And then when you start painting with these new presets, the grass looks a lot more random. It looks more like a grassy field than it does a nice pattern grass. So we're going to use these presets, and we're going to paint. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. We're going to zoom in and paint on her legs with that preset. A bit smaller. So you just make sure you're on the mask and your black brush is selected, and just start painting. And now all of a sudden it looks like there's little pieces of grass that are covering her, rather than just a smooth brush that we used to begin with. So this makes it look a lot more realistic. Just paint a couple pieces of grass in there, and what we're doing is we're actually deleting part of her legs, and what's showing through in the background is the grass in the background. So we're creating an illusion that there's grass in front of her, but we're really just deleting part of her legs where it shows the grass behind her. So I think that looks pretty good right there. A couple more random ones up here. Let's zoom out. And now it looks like she's actually in the scene. The only thing that we're missing is a shadow. She has not cast a shadow at all, and there is a light source. The sun is the light source. So we're going to make a shadow real quick. All you do is make a layer right underneath her. Get a nice soft brush. We're just going to paint a nice soft shadow right behind her. And I'm not going to use pure black. I'm going to use the picture of the shadows and the color of the shadows in the picture, which is kind of the dark brown, but it's not black completely. So kind of this color right here. I'm going to set my blend mode to multiply, so we're going to be pretty much close to black, but not completely black. And I'm going to zoom in. And we don't want to overdo this shadow, but we just want to make the impression that there is actually a shadow from her walking through the grass. So I'm going to set my opacity down to about 20%, change the size of the brush, and just paint very lightly. Just paint a nice shadow right here. Now I'm going to make it darker than it needs to be, then I'll go back and erase it. But I'm just painting just not doing an outline, just doing a basic shape. Painting a shadow. Okay, that shadow doesn't look very good the way it is, so what we're going to do is we're going to erase it using a mask. So just start fine-tuning that shadow you created. The closer you are to the object, the darker the shadow is going to be. The further away, the lighter the shadow is going to be. Alright, that looks pretty good. Now this is the shadow that we added. This is before, this is after, before and after. So it makes it look like she actually belongs in the scene just a little bit better. You could spend more time fine-tuning that shadow. For this tutorial, we're going to leave it at that. Alright, so we got our model, we got our background. Now we need to add the Bible verse, and we need to put it in her arms. So let's go to the Bible verse, select that, bring it to your canvas, and we're going to put it in her arms. And so right at this size and this orientation doesn't fit, because it does not easily fit into her hand. It might fit into her top hand, but it won't fit in her bottom hand. So we're going to make it a little bit larger. We're going to rotate it. And we're going to rotate it so that we can put the picture into her hand. So like there's one under her right hand. Put the top of the A will kind of go under her right hand, and then maybe the bottom of the N will go in her left hand. So maybe something like that. Maybe a little bit bigger. Alright, so we've got it in the general position that we want it. We've got it right over top of her, but it does not look like she's carrying it. It looks like we just put a letter over her hand, and that's because if this word was under her hands, you would see the top of her hand, and if it was under her arm, you would see the top of her arm, and you don't see that. So we have to erase part of the text that shouldn't be seen. And the easiest way to do that, like we've done with pretty much everything, is create a mask. Create a mask on the letters. Change your brush. Change the hardness to about 100%. And what we're going to do is you're going to erase part of the word that should not be seen. So the part that shouldn't be seen is the part under her arm. So we're going to go ahead and just erase the parts that you should not see. And I'm erasing too much on purpose, and we'll go back and fix that. Shouldn't erase her shirt. Should just erase her arm, but we'll go back and fix that in a second. So I'm erasing her arm. I'm erasing the part of the word under her arm. And then what we'll do is we'll go back and we'll fine tune that erasing. So I'm going to change my brush to white. I'm going to paint back the letters where they need to go. This is a pretty important part of the Photoshop. If you don't do this part accurately, it's going to be very noticeable. For example, if I was painting the letters back and I accidentally did something like this and didn't fix it, it would obviously be noticeable. Probably the first thing that people would see, and they would know that there's kind of a flaw in your creation. So try to do this as good as you can. Make the selection look very believable. You could go down and zoom into the individual pixels if you want to. I'm not going to do all that for this tutorial, but you get the idea. All right, that looks pretty good. Now we're going to do the exact same thing on her hands, her right hand. We're going to erase where her fingers should be. That looks good. I erased too much, obviously, and so that looks a little weird, so we're going to have to go back and fix that. I'm zoomed in very far. We're going to paint back the parts that need to be painted back. All right, and like I said, you can go down into the individual pixels if you wanted to and get a nice perfect selection. We're not going to spend the time doing that today, but you get the idea of how to erase part of the letters to make it look like it's underneath the hand. All right, let's back out and see how we look. That looks pretty good. It looks like she's holding it. One big flaw of this picture, though, is that there are no shadows being cast onto the letters, and that's kind of a mistake in the fact that the light source is coming from the left, pretty much, and her arm is not casting any shadow onto the letters. Her hand's not casting a shadow, her body's not casting a shadow, so it doesn't look like it fits right. So we're going to add a couple shadows in there. And adding the shadows is very simple. All you're going to do is create a layer above the text. You're going to clip it to make sure it goes into just the text. That way when I start drawing, it only draws on the letter. It does not go anywhere else. If I don't have it clipped, it goes everywhere. If I clip it, it goes just there. So let's go ahead and start drawing a shadow. I'm going to zoom in, and we're going to draw one right behind her arm onto the letters. So what I like to do is make the hardness about 0, about just a small brush, and the opacity is going to be about 10% or so. So all you got to do is start painting a shadow on the letters, and the closer you are to the arm, the darker the shadow is going to be, and the further away, the lighter it's going to be. So make sure like right under her arm is very dark, because hardly any light is getting there. And then the further away you get from the arm, it'll be a little bit lighter. So a nice dark shadow under the arm, almost black, not completely black. Okay, I'm going to make them brush size a little bit bigger and paint even more. Alright, let's back up and see how that looks. Alright, that looks pretty good. This is without the shadow. This is with the shadow. So it actually looks like there's some depth to that her hand is casting a shadow from the light back onto the letters. And let's do the exact same thing for her hand up here. I'm going to zoom in. And you can just do it on the same layer if you want to, or you can create a new layer. Just painting right in the spots where there would be no light or very little light hitting, which would be the shadow. So her hand would probably cast a shadow something like this. Very dark at very close to the fingers, but then not very dark the further you get away. So let's back off and see how that looks. Alright, that looks pretty good. We got a shadow under her hand, under her arm, so it looks like she's actually holding it. Again, you can spend a lot of time fixing those shadows, making them perfectly mimic the shape, but I think just a rough sketch like that is going to look pretty good. Alright, the letters look fine, but they're very smooth. Like I said, it was a 3D rendering, so there's no texture on this letter, so it looks kind of weird that there's noise and grain and everything in the rest of the picture, but there's no texture on the picture. So we're going to use that texture that I mentioned earlier. All it is just a picture of a stone or a rock or concrete. It's just a rough texture, and we're going to bring that right into our canvas, and we're going to clip it right into our letters right here, our Romans 8:28. So I'm going to size it kind of like that. And it's clipped completely in the letter, so it's only going on the letters. And I'm going to do a multiply. And that's a little bit too much of a multiply, so what I'm going to do is bring that down just a little bit, maybe to about 40%. Then I'm going to duplicate that again and go to overlay. And we'll do it at about 30%, about 25%. All right, so now the letters have a little bit of texture involved in them. So it doesn't look like a nice smooth object she's carrying. It actually looks like it has some details in it. And you can use your own texture. I like the rock texture, just kind of gives a nice rough edge to it. You could tone it down even more if you just want a very subtle texture. Maybe like that. Instead of 40% or 50%, you could do more like 20%. Alright, so here's our image so far. Looks pretty good. The model's in there. She's in the grass pretty well. Got their shadow underneath her. The Romans 8:28 is not casting a shadow. So what we're going to do is underneath the Romans 8:28, we're going to add just a nice soft shadow, just like we did with the woman earlier. So go to your brush, go to about 15%, and just draw in a very small or a very rough outline of the Romans 8:28. Go to multiply. And that's good like that. You don't even really have to do a shadow. Most of the shadow will probably be behind her, but if you just paint a nice little shadow back here, it just adds a little bit of more realism when you add the shadow on there. Okay, so we're pretty much done. You could call it a finished Photoshop right now. I'm going to add a few more coloring effects though. I'm going to go ahead and flatten the image. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a gradient on top of it. So make a new layer, go to your gradient tool, and the gradient I like to use is kind of the green and, let's reverse that, kind of the yellow and green gradient. So we got a yellow, this is radial gradient. it is a yellow circle surrounded by a blue background, and then in the middle it kind of goes to that greenish color. The numbers for that, the green is 005C59, and the yellow orange is FFA 800. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a gradient, a radial gradient, about right there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the blend mode to soft light. And I'm going to bring that back just a little bit. Looks pretty good. All right, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer. And I'm going to go to my foreground, the transparent one, and I'm going to change the color to kind of a yellowish color. And I'm going to paint a nice little sun right here. Maybe not that big, maybe about that size. Go to screen and back off just a little bit. All right, that looks good. And then the last thing I'm going to do is create a new layer, fill it with black. Go to render, lens flare. I do the 50 to 300 zoom lens flare, put it right here in the corner, go up to about 150% or so, screen, and now we have a nice lens flare coming out. I don't like all that lens flare down there, so we're going to erase some of that. Just go to your mask, using black, and just kind of erase some of that lens flare that you don't like. I'll keep a couple of them, but I don't want all of them. And I think that looks pretty good. One more thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to add, I'm going to go create a new image, a new layer. Go to image, apply image, hit OK. What this does is it flattens everything and creates a new layer of your image. Go to filter, other, high pass. I'm going to do 1 pixel. I'm going to do overlay. And what that did was it pretty much sharpened every object in the whole picture. So it added just a nice little sharpening effect to everything. So I think that's pretty much it. If you wanted to add more contrast, make it a little bit more dramatic, a really quick way to do that, go to gradient map, change it to black and white, and then go to soft light. And so this is your before and after there. So it adds just a little bit more drama, just a kind of a dramatic edge to it. So I'll leave that a little bit there. But you could play around with it, change your colors however you want to. But I think this is a good representation of Romans 8:28. It shows a woman carrying the Bible verse through the field. So pretty much the whole point of this image is to say that wherever we go, we can take the promises of God with us. So I hope you enjoyed this Photoshop tutorial. If you have any questions, please contact us, and we'll get back with you as soon as we can. And if you have any recommendations or thoughts or any future Photoshops you would like to see us work on, just let us know. And again, thank you for coming to ChristianPhotoshops.com. We hope to add many more of these in the future. And if you have any other questions, just let us know. Thanks.